Hello everyone, we are Group 16. Today we'll be discuss the tax obligation for our clinic Georgia. Georgia owns multiple property and she is answer about her tax obligation on the process from the sales. This presentation will assess her tax liability using borderline test and the relevant section of the Income Tax Act 2007, focus on three specific properties. We'll cover property 1 in Takapuna, her current residence, property 2 in Milford, sold in 2022, and the property 3 in Albany, which she planned to subdivide. Let's begin property 1, Takapuna.
I will be talking about the property 1. First, we are looking for the section CB6. This section applies to land acquired with the intent to sell it for a profit. In the case of Georgian and Doyle with CAR, the intent or purpose is assessed at the time of purchase. Since we have no evidence indicating that Georgia purchased the Takapuna period with the intention of selling it, so section CB6 does not apply. Secondly, for the section CB6A, this section applies under the Brightland test, where any profit from the sales of residential property is treated as income if the sales occurs within a certain time from after acquisition. For properties acquired on or after 27th March 2021, the Brightland period is 10 years. Georgia purchased her Takapuna property on 1st December 2022, so it falls under the 10-year Brightland rule. This means that if she sells the property within 10 years of acquisition, any profit from the sales could be taxable unless an expansion applies. Finally, for the CB16A, section CB6 does not apply if the property being sold is the owner's main home for most of the time during the Brightland period. A main home is defined as the place where the owner lives for the majority of the time. Georgia has lived in the Takapuna property since purchasing it, and it has been her primary residence for the entry ownership period. Therefore, the main home expansion under section CB6A applies to her. Georgia qualifies for this expansion as she has lived in the property for more than 50% of the Brightland period, and it has been her principal residence throughout her ownership. Since the Takapuna property has been Georgia's main residence, she is exempt from paying tax on any gains from the sales and the main home expansion. Consequently, she will not be liable for tax on the sales. As a result, section DB23 concerning deductions for taxable property sales does not apply in this case.
Welcome to property 2, Milford. Let's start with section CB16 of Income Tax Act. The section applies if property was purchased with the intention to sell for profit. The tax law taxes any gain made from the sale of land if primary purpose for purchasing the property was resale for profit. In Georgia's case, there's no evidence shows that she purchased Milford property with intention to sell. Instead, she primarily used the property as rental for most of ownership period. Demonstrate her purpose was to generate rental income. Therefore, CB16 does not apply, and there's no tax due under the section. Next, let's move to section DB23, which deals with depreciation recovery. If Georgia claim depreciation on the property asset while it's being rented out, she might need to pay tax on the depreciation recovered upon the sale. Depreciation is typically claimed on fixture, fitting, or other depreciable asset. Depreciation recovery apply when the property is sold for more than tax-adjusted value. The original cost minus any depreciation deduction. If depreciation was claimed, the amount of depreciation would be added back as taxable income. So if Georgia claimed depreciation recovered under DB23, there's no depreciation was claimed, then no tax is due under the section. Lastly, let's look at the main home exclusion. The exclusion can apply if property was used as taxpayer primary residence for most of ownership period, exempting any gain from tax. In this case, although Georgia's daughter and her family living in property renting free from April 2019 to March 2022, the exclusion does not apply because Georgia herself did not live in property. The property was primarily used as a rental, and their exclusion only apply if owner uses as their main residence, not a family member. So main home exclusion does not apply because Georgia did not reside in property herself. Thank you. Let's move on to property 3.
Then we move on to property 3, Albany. Georgia purchased a 2,000 square piece of land in Albany in 2006 for $1 million. She began subdividing it in 2020 and now plans to sell the plots individually. The key factors need to be discussed are purpose of purchase, scale, and nature of development. Subdivision and resale actions may indicate tax exposure. First, let's start with Section CB6A of Income Tax Act of 2007. This section adjusts the bright line test for incidental property sales, targeting short-term land square calculation, regardless of whether the seller is a land dealer or not. Earnings from the sale of land within a specific period after acquisition are liable to income tax under the bright line test. The bright line test, which is applicable to properties acquired after October 2015, does not directly apply to her situation because Georgia acquired the Albany land in 2006 and retained it until subdividing in 2023. In Georgia's case, Income Tax Act 2007 Section CB12 is the more pertinent provision. Profits from the sale of the subdivided plots may be taxed under Section CB12 if the subdivision or development once completed on the land within 10 years of its acquisition, particularly if the subdivision work was more extensive than minor. The Section CB12 would also not automatically apply because Georgia started her subdivision process in 2020 and finished it in 2023. It is more than 10 years after initial acquisition. While Georgia started her subdivision later, her activity is seeking consents and developing the land with the intent to sell indicates a profit-making scheme. It suggests a profit-making strategy that may still be liable to tax laws. Additionally, Section CB6 lists the earnings from the purchase of land within the aim of selling it may be subject to taxation, even if the sale occurs years later. Georgia must take the intention or purpose test into consideration, even in cases where the bright line test is not applicable. The profit from the sale might still be subject to income tax if she bought the land with the goals to resell it. Georgia would have benefited if she had originally bought the land for long-term investment rather than resale. In her instance, she didn't start the subdivision procedure until 2020, even though she had purchased the site in 2006. She might not be required to pay income tax if she can show that the land was initially acquired for her own use or for another uses such investment or passive holding, rather than primarily for the purpose of resale. But her subdivision and subsequent sales actions would suggest a change in intentions that would subject her to tax liabilities.
Here are the key points in Property 3. Georgia needs to consider intention or purpose test, even when the bright line test doesn't apply. This means that if she bought the land with the plan to resell it, any profit from that sale could be subject to income test. In Georgia's case, she purchased the Albany property back in 2006, but didn't start the subdivision process until 2020. This gap could suggest that her original intent wasn't to flip the land for profit. If she can demonstrate that she acquired the land for her own use or for other purpose, like investment or passive holding, she might avoid paying income tax on any future profits. Looking at Georgia's situation with the subdivisions in 2023, it seems likely that the land sales could fall under the development or subdivision tax rules, specifically Section CB12. Even though she's not a formal land dealer, the tax applications still apply based on her actions. What really matters here is the nature of the transaction and what she did with the property, rather than whether she has dealer status. By dividing the land into 3 lots with the intent to sell each for profit, it suggests she might be operating with a profit-making strategy, which could lead to income tax on those earnings. So, if she's engaging in regular land transaction or significant development, that could definitely trigger tax liabilities. Therefore, the purpose of her purchase and how she's developing the land will play a big role in determining what her tax obligation will be. And in summary, Georgia's tax situation with her properties is quite different for each one under New Zealand's Income Tax Act. Starting with the Tapuna property, she's in a good spot since she qualified for the main home exemption under Section CB16A. While she's lived there as her primary home since buying it, she won't face any tax on gains from a future sale. In contrast, the Melford property was primarily used as a rental. Given that Georgia did not live there herself, the main home exclusion does not apply. And while she may have potential depreciation recovery obligations under Section DB 23, this hinges on whether the depreciation was claimed during her ownership. The Albany property presents a more complex situation. Although she acquired the land in 2006, her decision to subdivide and sell the plots indicates a shift in purpose that could expose her to tax liability under Section CB12. The nature of her action, including the subdivision and intent to sell for profit, suggests a potential profit-making scam, despite her not being classified as a land dealer. Overall, Georgia's tax obligation depend on her intent at the time of acquisition and the nature of her use of each property. A thorough assessment for her original purpose for each property, alongside her subsequent actions, will be essential in determining her tax liability moving forward. Here are reference lists, and thank you for listening.